because that was me. And that was trillions of women around the world, that absolute helplessness where no one will help you. No one will listen to you. No one will care. But the people that did look after me and help me were other women. So I'm one of those women.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. Please subscribe to the show to hear inspiring stories every week, and also solo episodes where I help you reclaim your story. And today I am so excited to have special guest and an absolute force on the show, Geeta Sidhu-Robb. Geeta is an entrepreneur, CEO, lawyer, coach, and advocate for the empowerment of women. Geeta Sidhu-Robb is the CEO of Nosh Detox, founder of GSR Coaching, and the founder and CEO of W Corp, which works to certify organizations as being safe and supportive workplaces for women. Geeta, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Geeta, you have an amazing story of resilience and creating a full life living in alignment with your purpose. And I want to discuss today your newest venture, making the work world a better place for women, W Corp. But I want to start with sharing with the audience your story and what has motivated you to spearhead this movement.
You know, it's so interesting because you do something because you think you're doing it for this reason. I often wonder if the whole thing isn't simply just a journey of finding out who you are without kind of navel gazing, or rampant narcissism, one hopes. I was talking to a lovely woman this morning who said that she wanted to bring in legal kind of challenges on how to change how we approach women, so that we have these huge challenges that we can come forward and say, what about this and what about this? Because it brings eyes on something. And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. And it was so funny going through my history with her, because I was like, no, I know how to do this because we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. And I honestly feel that, do you know that story of Sisyphus, where you are, that old story where he was pushing a boulder uphill, and every morning he woke up and had to push the same boulder uphill. And that was his job. And sometimes I feel like that's what I do, but I'm not doing it with the same boulder. I'm kind of changing the boulder each time, but it's always about more freedom, more option, more power where it comes to women. So for me, I do this because I am an Indian girl from an upper class family who grew up in Malawi, which is in Central Africa. And the thing about we were very wealthy. And the thing about being that person is that you learn very quickly that money doesn't give you rights. Because we grew up in an environment which was deeply kind of racist, because we weren't black enough to matter or white enough to count. And so all we did was set up shops and banks and dealt with money and made too much money, and, kind of just were there as pot shots, kind of things to take shots at. And it was a very, so you always had that space where you never felt safe, because you're an immigrant in a place that you never felt safe. And then from that, I had a mother who was fairly determined that we weren't going to be spoiled brats, which I really resent, because I'm like, I would welcome some spoiled bratness, frankly, but that wasn't going to happen. And so she always wanted to make a difference. She worked as well from when we were little, but we ended up working with kids with polio. And I remember being 8 or 9 and seeing children who had no arms and legs working to make things so that they could earn money, so that they could live. And me thinking, wow, okay, that's really interesting, and having to do. And so she did a lot of work like that, but also having a father who decided when I was 11, 12. And I cannot overemphasize how privileged my upbringing was. He was like, let's go to South Africa in the midst of apartheid. I'm like, really? Do we have to? I mean, we didn't understand at all. And he would take us into places and people would say, we're not serving you because you're not white. Can you please leave the building? You're not allowed in here. Just get out or we'll have you arrested. You are not allowed in here. And you walked into doors and it had blacks and it had whites written. And we went, and I was like, but we're not black. And they're like, yeah, in you go. And it was just, and I say this sometimes because I think people don't understand how that was my lifetime. It wasn't a story. It was my lifetime. So I think all of those things kind of made me a little, let's just burn this house down. I don't like your house. I don't like how your house makes me feel. I don't like what you want me to do. So the surest way to get me to do something is to tell me I can't do it. And it built me a particular character. And I think no is the beginning of a sentence. And I have learned, I came out to school here when I was 15 and lived on my own, basically, more or less since then. And it has brought in me, I've always been a very trusting, loving person, but it has brought in me a desire of my own respect, my own belief, my own sense of right and wrong. And again, this is also my father had a very strong sense of right and wrong. And I have a very distinct sense of right and wrong. So that's kind of where I came from. I'm hoping that was the question you asked, because if it wasn't, you got a whole story for nothing.
No, I really appreciate that story. That's something that we cover a lot here on Talks with Dr. Shafer when we are reclaiming our story, as you have done with your life, and as you are now trying to help businesses create new stories for women so that they can work in those businesses and grow and succeed in them. It's really important to understand where we come from, because I think often the story starts with something that happened to us early in our adulthood that was really traumatizing, that's taken us 10 to 20 years to recover from. But the truth is there's backstory there, right? There's reasons we made those choices. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because there's a reason why Geeta approaches the world the way Geeta does. And in part, it was because you saw so much adversity from a socioeconomic privileged place. So you kind of were holding these two different realities and recognizing that there is a potential to change it, and that you were going to do that. You weren't just going to say, this is the way the world works, and I just have to be a victim to it and go along with what it says I have to do.
Yeah. And also, I think it honed to a very high extent, a deep, devout dislike of unfairness. I really struggle with things that aren't fair, and so I always don't think, oh, I can't do this because I'm like, well, that's not fair. No. That's and those words are the words that I don't really do it consciously, but I'm pretty sure those are the words that you hear just before I come and think, don't do that, So I always felt that it wasn't fair. The things that happened weren't fair. And people say things like, oh, the world's not fair. Duh. That's not of any interest to me at all. Those kind of throwaway lines mean nothing to me. I think that, we always have choices, right? We have choices as we grow up. Do we want to change the world? Do we want to make money? And frequently those are two different things. And I think making money and then giving to charity is still not the same thing. And I sort of I always wanted to make money because we were poor and for the kids, like when I was poor, when I had children, but I never wanted to become rich for the sake of being rich. It never interested me enough. I absolutely deeply desired to be a multi-billionaire. That would be friggin' amazing. Let's be clear about it. But that wasn't the goal I was going for. The goal, I didn't even know this, right? Dr. Shafer, if you look at it now, I didn't think I must have impact. I don't understand. I did not think like that. I mean, you could spend 4 seconds with me and that's not how my brain works. But I've had huge impact over my life. Over my adult life, I've had so much impact. And it's such a funny thing to say because it sounds like it should be somebody saying in a really kind of a voice, but I didn't mean to have the impact. I had it because I didn't want what was there. And I was like, no, I think we should just change that. And then I changed it. And then there was another thing. I was like, I think we should change that. And then I changed that. And I constantly, if I died tomorrow, I've had enough impact for a lifetime and I don't have to think about it. but I sort of thought, if I've gotten the hang of how to have impact, let me do it more consciously this time. That's where W Corp came from. I wanted a conscious way of having impact. The other ways were me reacting to something. This one I'm reacting, but I'm also like, I kind of know how to do this. Because normal people, and I'm very normal, don't think, I wonder how I can have impact. I don't think we do. I think we just, and I actually thought, how can I this time look at this and own who I am in my entirety and the power of who I am in my entirety and go, I'm going to change this and give myself 5 years to change how a workplace works and see how far I get.
I love that. I recall a talk that you gave years ago, and you actually asked someone in the audience to repeat that I am powerful, and asked them to reflect on their experience with that. And that moment gave me goosebumps, because I think when you're going into a workplace and you're coming in as a woman, and I think that's important, you're bringing that perspective and you're saying, how can we make this a safe place, a place where women can succeed, where they want to give you their best? Because women, we want to give you our best. Women are
Always.
incredible. We're incredible. So how can we get the women's buy-in? Because once we have their buy-in, we can do anything with them as a part of the team. And a part of it is empowering them, and to actually really get this message across that the women in your workplace, on your team, are powerful. Because I think many of us have had that feeling of going into a boardroom meeting. Even, for example, from my perspective, when I was a physician leader, going into the physician leaders' boardroom meetings at the hospital and feeling less than. Not only because I wasn't a part of the CEO, CMO, COO administration of the hospital, but also because I was one of the few women in the room. I was the youngest person in the room. And I was showing up to that meeting not from a place of empowerment. So how do we help companies create environments where women who may have not ever felt their power before, or have never been given the permission to embrace their power before, how do companies start that process to unleash that power for their betterment?
So I think you have to come from the place that you have to understand that the women have value for you. Because if you don't think they have value, you don't know why you'd be bothering, right? It can be a feel-good campaign, or it can be that you think there's a reason that you want to make the women feel better. That is the thing we're currently fighting with. And I'm trying to understand. It's so funny, you start over here and you find yourself talking over here. Because at the moment, what we're doing is really drilling down as a project in-house on the absolute merits financially, the ROI on having a woman-friendly business. Because in fact, for the majority of men, they don't care. And I know they don't care because they tell me they don't care. And I don't think this makes them bad. I honestly don't. Nothing we do is anti-men. I make an exception for my ex, who I'm deeply anti, but that's just me. Call me funny. I just think that in terms of generality of men, it should not be an us against them, because that is just not appropriate. It doesn't help anybody. And in the specifics, you go, girl, I'm right behind you. So the majority of men are like, listen, I'm here, I'm running this one man said to me, but I'm above the glass ceiling, Geeta. If I look down, I can pull whoever I want up. Why should I care it's there? And, he's got a point. Why should he care it's there? Mm. It's like being able to, it's not even as bad as when you look at, is sexism as bad as racism, for example? Or, is it? I don't know if it is. So there's a place where it doesn't, today, sexism does not have as much of a tenseness around it that Black Lives Matters has happened to create for racism. And that's actually, I think, a really big issue around here, because there isn't, it's just, oh, well, they're in less tough shit. Oh, well, you just lost your job because you're pregnant. Because it's almost like, well, it doesn't interfere with the status quo. Right? So that's the thing to understand. So when you get companies who now work on making it better for women to be in place, unfortunately, a great deal of that is done because they want to look good, not because they think it makes money for them, right? So there's that. Secondly, if you can take, it drills down to getting a company to understand, which is an amorphous being that is traditionally run by men, and the majority of them are white men, to understand that actually things have to be fit for purpose. So when you build a man's loo, you build urinals in a man's loo. And when you build a woman's loo, you don't say, here's a urinal with a stool. Best of luck. You build a loo because that's what's fit for purpose. And weirdly, magically, both those things exist, and they exist and under the same roof in the same organization. Now, what if, just hang with me here, what if we had a workplace that worked for men, and they can go from 9 to 5, and they can, work in the evenings, they can do whatever, because that's how their life is set up to work. And, they can enjoy and they can have whatever they want. But it's traditional old fashioned workplace, which we all know what they look like. And what if you brought in this other species called woman, and you said, listen, as a woman, I have biological imperatives because my periods are what happens to every single woman in the world at this particular place. I have, and it's painful and it's difficult and it's whatever. Then you have perimenopause, which happens to 100% of women from the age of about 35, and has the most unbearable physical effects over a 10 to 15-year period, which we didn't know even existed apparently till 4 years ago because we couldn't talk about it. And then you've got the biological, the cultural obligations of am I maternal? Do I have a baby? Or like I'm now finding out that my 90-and-a-half-year-old mother just needs looking after, and I've taken on another household and I'm now looking after that. How different is that to come to work from 9 to 5? It even took freaking longer to talk about it. Right? So by the time you finished it, you're like, oh, jeepers, that was like really hard work. What I want to do is build those two workplaces under the same roof, in the same organization. They don't have to hurt each other. They're just built fit for purpose. And you have a woman who, when you say, here's the project you need to do, you don't say, can you turn up at 8 o'clock every day so you can do this project? No, I bloody can't. School doesn't open to bloody 9 o'clock. What do you mean turn up at 8 o'clock? I can't do that. But you want me here at 10 o'clock and you don't tell me I've done less work, and I get that project finished, and then I leave at 3 o'clock because I pick up from school at 4 o'clock, and then I'll be back at work at 7 p.m. tonight. And then I'll work through to 8, 9, 10, 11. I used to go through to 12. And I'm not alone. But that's okay because you'll get everything you need. So why don't we do that? And why don't we do it painlessly and effortlessly and enjoy and appreciate that it's almost like learning another language.
That is so important to start incorporating just awareness, because our male counterparts at work really truly may not see the difference in the structure of their lives and the women in their lives, or their women that are living in parallel lives to them. And I love the point you made about just how long it took to even discuss the challenges of, this person that we're using as an example. Because at the end of the day, it comes back to something I've heard you discuss and many of us have felt, is this feeling of don't be too much. And when we actually take up the space to, instead of when someone says, how are you? Say, I'm fine. Right? When we don't just reflexively say, I'm fine, but we take up the space to say, well, this is what my day looks like today, and it's a little overwhelming, and I'm usually able to cope with it. But right now, I'm feeling like it's a big challenge and I need someone to hold space for me. When we actually say what we're experiencing and explain what our lives look like to someone else who is not experiencing them, I think it's not an uncommon response to get kind of a wall of like, okay, well, I didn't really want to know. But the thing is, well, you did ask, right? You did ask, how are you? And in work settings, we ask people all the time, what can we do for you? But we don't necessarily listen to the answer, or we don't get an honest response because the person we're asking knows we don't really want to know the answer. We don't really want to help them. We just want them to check in 9 to 5. When their kid is sick, we don't want to hear about it. We don't want to deal with it because we're just not educated on the fact that if we continue on in this moment to moment, put out the wildfires, don't invest in creating an environment that allows women to be a part of the environment and allows them to thrive and not be in survival mode, They're going to leave the workforce. They're going to leave their job. We're going to have to pay to replace them. And we're going to lose all of the skills and the changes to our environment, our working environment that they bring to us with their beautiful communication skills and their hard working efforts. We're going to lose that if we don't really invest in creating a better environment for women.
Yeah. And then, a lot of companies struggle with this as a concept because they'll say things like, but, women tend to leave just because they get offered more money somewhere else. And it's like, no, they leave because this environment sucks. As long as you're clearly aware that the women that are leaving your organization today, yesterday, last year, the year before, are leaving because your environment sucks. And if you're hearing, did you hear me? Sucks.
Yeah.
For a woman, then you can understand, oh, but I can fix that. And you can. This is the joy of it. Think of just building two separate loos. Think of building two different, containers. That's all you have to do. You honestly and truly do not have to go and become uncomfortable. I mean, you don't have to do any of those things, because a lot of the problem also comes down to the fact that we show you how to do that, right? Nowadays, because we're here, and there are so many other organizations as well, we just focus on one niche infrastructure aspect, right? We will teach you how to create an infrastructure, an environment, and a culture that will make those women want to stay, and that immense loyalty that comes out of it. But think of also all the money you'll save. Like I always say, you hire a male CEO and then you spend millions teaching him how to think like a woman. Don't bother. We'll turn up and help you. We'll do that bit for us.
I want to go back to what motivates you to really spearhead this and why you believe in it so deeply. And it takes me back to your story of what it was like to be a highly educated, strong, resilient woman who to the world seemed to have every resource necessary to thrive. And then to go to being homeless with your children on the street and recognizing how tenuous the experience of women worldwide is when they are mothers, when they are working, and they don't have a truly supportive environment and a plan to stay in the workforce when things really get difficult, when life gets really challenging.
Completely. I mean, there's nothing like standing outside your freaking £8 million house 15 years ago, holding my son's hand, carrying the baby, while her sister holds my clothing, whatever it was, and I had the bag of nappies hooked on my little finger, because let's definitely not leave the nappies behind, and a handbag. And there's that moment where you're standing on the pavement and you're looking around and you're thinking, I don't know where to go. I don't know where to take them. I don't know where to move to. I don't know. And I was like, okay, let's just sit down. The kids are like, can we go back in the house? And I'm like, no, sweetie, just sit here, sit on the pavement, just relax. And luckily it wasn't raining. And they're just like, out here, mama? And I'm like, yeah, baby, sit on the pavement, just sit here. And then I moved, we had a tree here. And the way our houses are built, you don't have these big yards you have in the US. We have these, we had space and the odd tree and space to like put one car. And I walked to the tree over here and I rang a friend and he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, I'm really busy. I can't help you. And I rang my mother, which was after, and then she's like, yeah, no, you're an idiot. Go back to him. Because why would you leave all that money? And I was like, I'm not leaving the money. I just was like, I help make that money. Just give me my version. Give me some of my half of it. Do you know what I mean? If you don't think you want to give me half, damn, give me a third, whatever. But it's mine, because I'm slowly finding out that, every card has been canceled. Every bank account's been emptied and the kids are still sitting on the floor. And it was 2:00 and yeah, anyway, so it was a really terrible experience because, that you've got to find somewhere for them to sleep tonight. They've got to go to school in the morning. You're due at work and you're just, you're like, I can't stay here anymore because it's too violent and it's too dangerous and it's too difficult and I may not be alive tomorrow. So I have to leave now. And there's a place, the thing about that is so interesting is the sheer helplessness. And this is the thing about women. We are regularly and consistently and inevitably made helpless. And we're made helpless for so many reasons. We're made helpless because we're brought up socializing for approval, external approval. We're brought up helpless because when we have babies, we lose our jobs because we're meant to have, I mean, the US doesn't even have maternity leave, right? But here, at least we have maternity leave, but trying to get back into work is too difficult. We're helpless because we're at the mercy of a system that when my ex went through all our bank accounts and emptied them, he was talking to white men like him who helped him empty my bank accounts. And there were people I knew who were doing it, you know, and I knew who they were. And I'm like ringing, going, Robert, you can't, I'm on the street with 3 kids. You can't do this. And Robert's like, I'm awfully sorry. I just can't. There's nothing I can do. And, you know, you're like this and you're thinking, and it's, we're constantly and consistently made helpless because the infrastructure of the world does not support you naturally, you know, it doesn't naturally support you. And so, and I mean, I was also helpless because we were making all this money and I was like, babe, you look after the money. I'm having the babies and I'm going to work and then invest it, do all the good things with it. That also is supposed to be a bad thing to do, but it wasn't supposed to be a bad thing to do, to trust my husband. Right. And when I started thinking about W Corp, I think I've said that I was happily, because the kids are now, they're so old, I lie about their age, not mine. But the kids are older and there we are wandering through life and I'm a coach and I honestly, it is the best job I've ever had in the entire world. I love my job. And I was like, this is just great. I'm making so much money, but I'm now keeping some of that money, thank the Lord. And I'm just going to go and look up how much Chanel handbags cost these days and buy a little flat in South France. I mean, this is where I was happily. And the universe was like, hold my beer. And I read a court transcript because I used to be a lawyer. And this woman said about this man who had been sexually abusing the women in his business for 18 years. And he worked half a mile up the road from me. And they kept bringing him to court and they could not get any of it to stick because every time he'd end up in a judge who was one of his buddies. And they'd say things like, stop raping them. They don't like it. See you at the club tonight. You know, thing. And eventually a few women got together and finally managed to bring him down. And the Me Too movement obviously helped an immense amount because they finally worked out you couldn't just say this because it wasn't the right thing to do, or you'd get caught if you did it, not like, you know. And they said that the women on the top floor, when this man was going downstairs, would ring the women on the ground floor and say, he's coming down, hide behind a locked door. And the bloody universe knew while I was holding the universe's beer that I could never get past that concept because that was me. And that was trillions of women around the world, that absolute helplessness where no one will help you. No one will listen to you. No one will care. No one will look after you. No one. But the people that did look after me and help me were other women, right? So I'm one of those women. Now, how am I? I never even thought of it as a paying it forward. That's not been relevant in a thought. It's just something you should do, right? And so I was like, no. They couldn't go to HR. They couldn't stop their boss. They couldn't go to court. So I was like, okay, what can I do? What if I could do something? What would it be? And then that's how I came to W Corp. All these emotional things. There were giggles and tequila along the way, I'm pretty sure, but you know.
And I think that's the beauty of how you deliver your message as well, and what makes you such an effective founder and spokesperson for this mission, that you involve humor, you involve the really challenging stories, because those of us who have lived these stories, we know we have to get to a point where we can hold that story and examine it. And we've dealt with the emotions, and now we need to take the lessons from it. We need to acknowledge the emotions, and now we need to move forward so that we can take the lessons, but not live in that pain. I wanted to share a story from when I was training as a neurologist and I was working in a hospital. I won't give too many details about the hospital, but I was training in a hospital. I was trying to make sure that a patient had their medication on time. And it was a patient that it was really, really important that the timing be really exact because they have a very specific condition called myasthenia gravis. So the timing was very important, especially because we were really just trying to get their quality of life and their symptom control perfected. That's the whole reason they were in the hospital. And so I was working with them to try to accomplish that. And I was there. I was present. I was going to, do my testing, make sure that I was doing the best I could for the patient. And I wanted to collaborate with the nurse who was working with the patient. I love the nurses that I work with. They are incredible. They are such amazing partners in patient care. They're so important. They make the work that doctors do possible, right? We can't do our work without nurses. I love nurses. And so I had always had a very collaborative way of showing up to these work environments. And so I said, okay, we need to do XYZ and get this done. We're going to do this special test to see how they're swallowing and talking and their facial strength. And I was met with anger. And I was so surprised because, again, I was so focused on the mission and also making sure I was communicating in a way that was, very team oriented and mission oriented. I was very surprised by this. I got pulled by this person who was almost twice my size, weighed at least twice as much as I did, and towered over by me by probably 1.5 feet. Very large man. Pulled me into a closet, physically stood over me and intimidated me because they felt embarrassed that I, this tiny little girl, right? I was quite young. I was just training. This was many years ago. And this tiny little girl had dared to ask them to do something because to them it felt like an order. And that was about them. I recognize now I didn't do anything wrong. That was just how they were showing up to that situation. But in that time, I didn't have any training on how to handle something like that. I eventually, I think a day or two later, went to administration and I explained what I'd been through. And you could just see the body language of the kind of lower level administrator kind of slumping over because this wasn't the first time this had happened.
Yeah.
It was far from the first time this had happened.
It's a kind of like a,
darn it, this has happened again. Why does this guy keep doing this? But because of the structure of this specific hospital system, it's very difficult for people to be let go from it, especially people that work there for a certain amount of time. And that is what they explained to me. And they said, you just need to distance yourself from this person. Now, here I am, a trainee. I have zero control over who I work with. And frankly, even as a staff physician, you don't control which nurses are assigned to your patients. And I could not imagine going up to someone and saying, oh, no, I don't want this person on my case. I can't imagine doing that. So here I was put in this position of, just avoid this person who had literally physically intimidated me and threatened me in a closet
where
because I had
trapped.
just asked them to do their job.
Yeah.
And so when I think back to an experience like that and how formative it was to me very young in my career as a physician, it just brings to light how important this sort of training is for companies in all fields and all types of work environments.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, all of us have these stories. We all have these memories. We all have it's interesting because I talk to a lot of younger women and they'll say things like, I now do it less and I do it differently, but they're like, you're just not a feminist. And I'm like, you know what? Take 15 years, work out what it's like when you've got some babies and you're a bit helpless and you haven't had to work or you couldn't work or you would, then come back and phone me and let's talk about it. Because what am I going to do? Tell you the reality? No, until it happens to you, the beauty that you have at 21 will never prepare you for the way that you look at 51. The skills that you have at 21, the power you feel then, will never prepare you for how helpless you can be at 41 with 3 small kids. These are, or what was it? I know I was 30. Anyway, there's just a place where you can't teach people anything. But what I think we need to do is stop trying to change individuals and try and make the infrastructure a place that helps everyone, right? Because we currently have a workplace that helps men. Great. Now we need a workplace that helps women. And what we want to do is make it into a place where a woman never has to say please or thank you to her manager or her boss, because that is the only way she can, oh, I'm so lucky my boss is. No, you don't go to the loo and go, I'm so lucky there's a loo that works for women, do you? Why? Because we're entitled to it. So fine, right? I don't go to the hairdressers and think, oh, thank God you're going to wash my hair before you dry it. It's part of the system. It's the infrastructure. Why do I have to say thank you for the door that enables me to enter a room? The door should be there because it is absolutely, if I show, let me make it another thing. If you are Japanese and I have a client like this who's trying to learn German, you would not tell the Japanese, get over yourself. Stop being difficult and just learn German, okay? You wouldn't do it. You would find them a German teacher. You would help them acclimate. You would help them work it out. You would work out what to do with them. That's what this is. Actually, you here speak German. I here speak Japanese. Let's all be reasonable and calm and make it so it works for the Japanese speaker and it works for the German speaker. And we're all good and we all just move on. It doesn't have to be a drama, honestly. It's super simple. And it will never affect the people it's not meant to affect. There's a company that someone was telling me about the other day, and they were saying that, the women get 9 months paid maternity leave. So when people were interviewing for the women, they were like not hiring as many women. They noticed a drop off because of the 9 months maternity leave. And they were like, screw it. So they added 9 months paternity leave too. So now they're like, oh, well, you may as well hire the right person for the job. And I'm like, exactly. So it's doable. How do we make it doable for everyone that is a woman?
I love that. And I love how that simple perspective shift, that reframing of, okay, we've allowed maternity leave, which is huge, right? When you're signing up for a job and you are of childbearing age, or you're thinking of adopting a child, you're in a phase in your life where this is your future. That's a huge benefit. But if it's only for women, is that actually going to end up hindering your ability to be hired? So I love that you as a company have recognized that and said, let's make this equitable. So there's no reason why, if you have a female and a male candidate, that you would just knee-jerk reaction go with the male candidate because you think this is a more stable long-term choice.
We need to stop thinking of it as man versus woman, and America is doing a really good example of trying to wipe out the fact that women exist on every level. And so that's a little minor hiccup you all have to fix, please, soon. That would be helpful. But if you just looked at humans, why do we provide wheelchair ramps? Why? Because
so people
somebody
can
who has
access.
Do you know what I mean? We completely assume they have a right to access, right? They have a right to exist. They have a right to be in the workplace. They have a right to all those things. We accept that. Great. Now, if we can accept that, how the heck can we not accept that women actually have periods, make babies, and look after their elderly parents? It's not really a great friggin' stretch, is it? Honestly, it's just so basic. But I feel like one of the biggest issues I've hit is that until I can prove that there is a financial recompense for hiring women, no one's going to pay attention. So that's our next step, as I said. But also because when we aren't in a business, we can have conversations with the business that women in the business are just too scared. It is the most horrifying thing. I listen to huge businesses that turn over hundreds of millions of pounds, and the women dollars as well. And the women are too scared to talk to the management about it. Just too scared. I'm like, you earn 7 figures a year and you're in senior management and you're afraid to have this conversation. They're like, yeah. Like, all right.
There's something that we can work on. It's interesting because it's those trigger points, those points where people feel that fear and discomfort. We need to know those trigger points because that's where we have the greatest potential to improve the situation with honing in on it and working on it with someone like yourself and with W Corp. So that's really beautiful. Can we focus in on some of those statistics? Because I know that you have spoken on the statistics about the benefits of retaining women in the workforce and how that positively affects the bottom line for people who are saying, listen, we love women, we support women, but this is a business. Make it make sense to us. Why do we want to invest in supporting women long term?
There's huge studies done on this. Australia did a massive study for ages. The Scandi companies have done this again and again and again. And every single major consultancy in the world, from KPMG through to McKinsey, has done studies to prove this again and again and again. And it is to say this, that if you are running a business and the business is growing, that's fine. And if the economy is growing, your business will grow. Hooray, go you. But the minute there's any upheaval, or there's a shrinkage in the market, or there's a downturn, you're going to be scrabbling because you only have one viewpoint. So there's that one thing. The second thing to pay attention to is that women are the ones that decide how money will be spent. They actually not will decide, they do. Like we went through a huge phase here where we called it the pink pound. But the female, pound, if we were going to look at it, there is women make the decisions. The third thing is that Morgan Stanley did a conference, I think about 3-4 years ago, where they talked about how there was a huge wealth transfer happening to the hands of women. So, for example, in the United Kingdom next year, 65% of the wealth in the country will be in the hands of women. I think in the US, it might be 2026 that the majority of wealth will be in the hands of women. So whether you like it or not, this is coming to a cinema near you, so we should pay attention. But the statistics of themselves are like companies with at least 30% female leaders have innovation revenue, which is 15% higher. And big companies really struggle with innovation. They struggle with it. Not only are you going to be innovative, but you're going to make more money out of that innovation. Boards that have at least one woman come on board actually have an immense change in the amount of profit, increase in the amount of profit they're making. I'm trying to look at some of the statistics. Of course, I don't have them here. Companies with a higher gender diversity are 25% more likely to have above average profitability. The highest representation of women on boards financially outperform those with the lowest number of women on boards by 66%. 66%. So if you put women on your board, you are going to outperform other people in your sector by 66%. Right? It's insane. So, and the whole place of gender diversity and stuff, it's like we would just add, like Warren Buffett talked about this recently as well. Well, recently, about 4 years ago. And he talked about the productivity and how much better you can make something when you actually allow women to produce and be productive in the environment. We have an organization we certified in South Africa, and they literally spend money teaching women how to become farmers. Because if you've got a man who will be a farmer, what if you could have a woman who'd be a farmer as well? That is literally a developing country case for making higher GDP. Why would you not have that when you look at it like that? It's stupid not to have it. Right? And these are statistics that honestly, they're as free and long as my hair. There are so many statistics that will prove again and again and again. The thing is, the only people that know about these statistics are women. The men don't know about it. The men don't understand them. They're not relevant to them. And because they don't know, they don't understand, they're not relevant, they're not taking them into account. Now, the interesting thing about it that does work is the men that do know about it. In my research, the men we have certified, the men that are talking to us, they're all really, funnily enough, girl dads.
And I will say too, I don't know if you experience this with your coaching, but that is a unique referral source for me for my coaching are these amazing girl dads who reach out and they say, listen, as a present to my daughter, I really want to connect her with you because I think that she would benefit from your services. And I see the value to her. And it's a really unique thing that, when you're marketing and when you're deciding, how are you going to find your customers? You don't necessarily think that those are the people that are going to be reaching out to you, but it makes perfect sense, especially when you are serving people who are early on in the journey to reclaim their stories or early on in their self-empowerment journey. They may not even recognize the need, but someone who really loves them recognizes the need. And I think that that is such a beautiful thing. I love how you hone in on that and the power that collaboration holds for moving forward. We need men to be a part of the solution.
Completely. And we need them to speak up about that. And, why don't we make it easier for them to do that? Because a lot of the times there are men that want to do it and don't know how to do it. So that's one thing I like about what we do. We help you work out how to do that.
Beautiful. Geeta, can you tell listeners how they can learn more about you and W Corp so that they can incorporate this into their businesses? They can pass along this information or even reach out to you for coaching.
That would be lovely. Well, let's say this. If you are a small organization, and this is the thing people always say, oh, but I'm so small, it doesn't matter. Here's one place where you can have a huge impact. If you are an organization that is you plus one freelancer and above, we will certify you. Because this is one of the few places in the whole world you can make an impact on the world, because we want to create a global movement. So the small organizations, the women-run organizations, are the easiest to persuade. So please, when you stop and go, but it's not ready for me just now, you are the perfect person. You are. Because when you have 1,000 small women-run businesses doing something, can you imagine how much people have to pay attention? They can't ignore it. Whereas the bigger companies are making all the money and going, yeah, we'll get there later. So they really struggle with it. But to come and please find me, have a conversation with me, go to www.wcorporation.org, because there you'll see the whole process of how to get certified, why to do it, and how it works. Or find me on any social media or LinkedIn, and it's Geeta Sidhu-Robb. So anywhere. Well, I'm even on TikTok, but we don't tell the children that either.
TikTok is its own location, isn't it? But I love TikTok. I love the community of TikTok.
Yeah, I do too. I like TikTok. I spend time on TikTok, and we have a big audience on TikTok.
That's awesome. And definitely everyone follow along. And I highly encourage you to also listen to other talks that Geeta has given, because they are so inspiring. You have such an incredible history, much of which we haven't even had the opportunity to get into today. So we may have to circle back and have you on a panel of female entrepreneurs in the future to share these stories, because at the end of the day, our stories, they're a part of who we are, but the challenges don't have to define us. They're simply steps along the way to the future that we are building for ourselves. And you are building such a beautiful future for yourself and for other women and companies that will benefit from bringing women into the fold and into the workplace in this way.
Thank you. That's a lovely way to put it, but it's true. I am not who I was, and I don't have to be. And I am who I am today, and I've chosen this version of me, and I every day work out how to make that version of me more of what I want. And that's something that I care a great deal about. So thank you so much for the space and the time to be seen and heard.
Thank you so much for being here. And to our audience, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Please contact us with any questions and check out Geeta's website and services. This is going to certainly change the world, and we're so excited to be a part of the first year of W Corp and to watch it grow over time. And you and your company can be a part of that. So absolutely sign up. I know we at Talks with Dr. Shafer will be participating as well and working towards that certification, because we also want to be a place where women can work and be a part of building their beautiful futures. So thank you again for being here. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. that